One of the biggest challenges any creative businesses face isn't the quality of their work, it's getting clients to say yes. Because no matter how good your service is, prospects will always have questions, concerns, and objections before they eventually move forward. And if you don't know how to handle those objections correctly, you can lose great clients even if you're the right person for the job. So in this video, I'm going to answer the 5 main objections creative business owners hear, what they mean, and how to respond to them. So let's get into it. So let's start with the most common objection. It's too expensive. And when that happens, the natural reaction is to defend the price. You explain your process, your experience, and the amount of work it takes. But that's usually the wrong response. Because when someone says that it's too expensive, they're rarely talking about the number itself. What they're really saying is that they don't see enough value to justify the investment. Think about it. People spend thousands of dollars every single day on products and services that cost far more than the alternatives available. The reason they do it isn't because cheaper options don't exist. It's because they don't believe the value it's worth paying for. And the same thing applies to your business. If the prospect really understands the outcome you're helping them achieve, the conversation becomes less about the price and more about the transformation. So instead of immediately trying to defend your fee, try to really understand what's behind the objection. Do they fully understand the value? Are they comparing you to someone else? Or do they trust that the outcome is achievable? Because those are the real questions they ask themselves. The conversation should always come back to the transformation or the outcome you're helping them achieve, not the hours you're spending to get there. That's why it's too expensive isn't a pricing problem. It's a value perception problem. So the second objection is, can you show more proof? At first this sounds like a question about the quality of your work or your experience. But most of the time it's actually a trust issue. And the mistake many creative business owners make is responding by sending everything they have, more proof, more testimonials, more examples. But more proof doesn't necessarily create more trust, because clients aren't looking at everything you've ever done. They're looking for evidence that you can solve their specific problem. So the more closely your testimonials match the client's situation, the more confidence they have that you can help them too. So when someone asks for more proof, don't ask yourself, what else can I show them? Ask yourself, what's the most relevant example I can show them? Because trust isn't built by showing more work. It's built by showing the right work. The third objection is, I'm not ready. While this sounds like a timing issue, it's usually a priority issue. What they're really saying is, this isn't important enough for us to act on right now. Because when something is urgent, people find a way to make it happen. And the mistake many creative business owners make is trying to push harder. They follow up more, create more pressure, harass the potential client, but that doesn't work. Instead, you need to understand why the problem isn't a priority to solve. What happened if they don't solve it? What opportunities are they missing? What is the cost of staying where they are today? Because if the consequences of doing nothing isn't clear, there's no reason for them to act right now. The goal isn't to pressure people into making a decision. The goal is to help them understand the cost of delaying it. So the fourth objection is, I've tried something like this in the past. And this is one of the most common objections you'll ever hear. What they're really telling you is that they've been disappointed in the past by working with other people. They probably invested time and money into a solution that didn't really deliver what they were expecting. So now they're skeptical. And the mistake most people make is immediately trying to convince them that they are different. But saying I'm different or we are different doesn't mean much. Everyone says that. Instead, you need to get curious. Ask them what happened. Ask them why they think it didn't work. Ask them what was missing from the experience. Because the more you understand where the previous solution failed, the easier it becomes to show how your approach is different. You're no longer trying to sell them a service. You're helping them understand why they didn't get the result the first time they tried it with someone else. And when you can identify that gap clearly, the conversation shifts from skepticism to possibility. That's when trust starts to build. So the fifth and final objection is, can you do it for cheaper? And this is where most business owners make a costly mistake. They reduce the price. But when someone asks for a discount, the problem isn't the price. The problem is that they see your service as comparable to other services provided by other people. In other words, they don't yet see enough difference between you and the alternatives available to them. Because when a prospects believe that you are the right fit to help them achieve their outcome, the price becomes a small portion of the conversation. That's why lowering your price is never the solution. Instead, you need to bring back the conversation to value, transformation, and outcome they'll get. What outcome are they buying? What makes your approach different? Why is this investment worth more than the cheaper alternatives they're considering? And if they don't have the budget, they're probably not the right fit. They're probably not the ideal client. The moment you start competing on price, you enter a race that someone else will always be willing to run for less. So the goal isn't to be the cheapest option. The goal is to be the clearest one. So the key thing to remember is that objections are rarely about what people say on the surface. It's too expensive is usually a value problem. Can you show more proof is usually a trust problem. I'm not ready yet is usually a priority problem. And when you learn to identify what's truly behind the objection, the conversation becomes way easier. Because instead of trying to convince people, you're helping them make a better decision. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.